Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
I found her.
Yep.
She tried to run away, but didn't work. No, never mind. Anyway, Geeky Sparkles is here. You've got her for 2 videos today. We're gonna talk about comics. We're gonna talk about comic shops, the state of the comic book industry, and the reality starting to sink in with the media and especially people that cover comics that, hey, maybe things aren't so great after all.
Shocker.
Shocker. And there's gonna be a little bit of salt coming from me because we're gonna go back to how and why we started kind of the channel in the first place, or why we started talking about stuff we did in the first place. And it goes back to calling out problems with the comic book industry, not realizing that there was all this Twitter drama going on, and getting called Comicsgate and all this other shit. And then all of a sudden we had people dogpiling us and trying to blacklist us. And I had people who I worked with for years unfollow me on Twitter just because I said, hey, there might be some problems with the comic book industry.
Well, the numbers at Marvel aren't looking good.
The numbers at Marvel aren't looking good. So we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about Marvel and what might happen now that Marvel Entertainment is gone and Marvel's being absorbed into Disney, and some comic book journalists pointing out things that we pointed out years ago now. Of course.
Yep.
Of course.
That's how it always goes.
And then we're going to talk about the backups. The backups for comic sales at comic shops. The last couple of years have been like Funko Pops and Magic the Gathering. Right. And there are some problems there now too. Yep. So I think the comic book industry, or the nerd pop culture store thing industry, is in for a very rude awakening.
Well, what's funny to me is we've talked about the numbers for years. They keep saying, oh, it's in a lull now. And we've been talking about this for years. And people are on like Twitter and stuff saying about, well, if you use Clownfish TV as your source, I know you're full of crap because here's my one obscure source on a site that agrees with me that I'm going to pull up and say is right. Just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah. Just because you don't like the truth doesn't mean it's untrue.
Not the truth, yeah.
You know, but we're living in a time where people are trained to view things through the lens of your truth, your personal truth, your subjective truth.
We're living in a society that if you don't like or agree with them about a show or a movie or something like that, you suddenly an alt-right Yahtzee and all this other crap. And I'm like, I'm still trying to understand how being a Republican is an insult, but whatever. And we're not even Republican. But I think that's ridiculous if people are like, that's what they go to. Like, well, you're a Republican.
Oh my God.
And it's like, okay.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about all this stuff. Before we get into anything further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We do talk about comics occasionally, not as much as we used to, because I'm going to tell you the truth. The Western comic book industry ain't doing so hot right now. And frankly, people aren't interested in comic book videos. There's a reason that this one got pushed back 2 weeks.
That's probably not going to do that well, but it's a Sunday.
It's a Sunday, so we're going to dump it on a Sunday. And the reality is nobody cares about the Western comic book industry anymore. I mean, that's the truth. Consumers don't care. Longtime comic book fans don't care. The only time they seem to care is when the comic book industry does something laughably stupid.
They care about back issues.
They care about back issues, yeah.
They care about like manga and graphic novels. That's about it.
Yeah, pretty much. So we're going to talk about all this stuff. I think we're over 300,000. We're over 300,000. Thank you so much for the support. We're a couple hundred over. I'm still going to wait a week or two to make sure that that's, YouTube not being stupid. But, and I think after that, I'm going to kind of cool my heels on constantly asking for subs. I understand.
I know, I get tired of it too.
I know you get tired. Everybody does it though. That's the thing. Like every YouTube channel, I mean, God, they've got ones that have like a little animation at the beginning. It's like, before we even talk about the video, please subscribe. And here's how you do it. And click the bell. And
that's what you just did.
So here's how you subscribe. You go down below and you hit the subscribe, then you click the bell. All right. Anyway, let's talk about this. I want to talk about this first. I want to talk about comic book journos and the state of denial that they've been in for years, that the comic book industry is not doing very well. They've done a lot of mental acrobatics, trying to say that comics are fine, usually by rolling in numbers from crowdfunding and manga. And, they've also been vehemently defending the fact that, comics are always going to exist in the way that they exist now. And this is a recent article from Heidi McDonald. Now, to be fair, I don't think Heidi has ever called us out personally. She does have an issue with a lot of comics YouTubers because I think they're eating her lunch. But
there's not much there to eat, to be honest.
There's not much more left. Yeah, the beat's not doing, I don't think it's doing that hot, guys. But anyway, she puts this out. This is gospel because it's coming from her. And again, this is one of the fundamental truths of the comic book industry is it's not what you say, but who you are when you say it. You can have two people say the exact same thing. If one of them is a no good Nick YouTuber, it will be mocked and dismissed. If a reputable member of the Distinguished Comic Book Media Alliance says it, it's 100% true. And you just have to take their word for it. So talking about Ike Perlmutter and Marvel getting rolled into Disney. It could mean that Disney will begin to rely on licensing out their Marvel Comics production, something they've already been doing with Scholastic in the young reader graphic novel area. They also did it with IDW. They've also struck major deals with Penguin and Taschen for deluxe reprint programs. That's coming from Heidi McDonald, respected comic book journalist. I put this article out 5 years ago, and I said that there's a very good chance, as somebody who worked in Disney Comics, or worked on Disney Comics for about 12 to 15 years at that point, there's a very good possibility that at some point in the future, Disney would just decide it wasn't worth publishing Marvel Comics anymore and just outsource all of it. And oh my God, that is kind of what got us dragged into everything that we're doing now.
I remember one guy was like, he didn't realize that you worked in comics. And they're like, what? Some Disney bloggers trying to tell us how comics work. And it's like, dude, did you read the article?
Yeah, people did not realize now, we were running the Kingdom Insider, which, long story short, we're not now, and there was a lawsuit in there somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I was very familiar with the comic book industry and how comics worked because we worked on comics for a number of years. We had an agent that was one of the reputable comic book agents.
The one that told me I wasn't feminist enough.
The one that told you weren't feminist enough, yes. And, so we knew a lot of people in the industry. Worked primarily on Disney books and licensed books. I knew very well how things worked. And I said, as someone who worked on Disney Comics, Heidi also did at one point in time. She worked on Disney Adventures magazine, if I remember correctly, that it didn't make sense for Disney to do everything in-house when every other property, they job it out, right? And that is what got us sucked into all this shit that we started talking about on the channel, got us blacklisted. We weren't invited to conventions anymore. We had friends that we were friends with for years unfollow us on Twitter, all because, hey, maybe comics aren't doing so hot now.
Yeah, that's all we did.
That's all it took. So let's fast forward now, 5 years later. And everybody's like, oh, comics are doing great, guys. Last year, 2021, was a really good year for comic sales. What they're not saying is what comics were selling, and it was mostly manga.
Right,
it was almost exclusively manga. So,
but they were also rolling in like crowdfunders that people were doing, like the millions in crowdfunders. They were rolling that in there too and stuff.
Yeah, and this was very telling. I mean, it basically showed us like to what extent the media would do these mental gymnastics to try to justify the state of the direct market. And it's like the direct market really had very little to do with it. It was all freaking manga. So
a lot of it's back issues too.
Yeah, a lot of it back issues. So it was just total comic sales, right? So here we are in 2022, ICV2 again. Uh-oh, guys. The 2022 comic store sales boom cycle goes bust. And there it is, guys. Because a lot of people said, hey, comic shops are shutting down all over the place. And
when you say that, there's a bunch of new ones opening too.
Well, okay, so this is another...
That's they counter with.
This is another Heidi McDonald thing. YouTubers have been calling out comics media, saying, like, how come nobody knows how many comic book shops are in the US anymore? Because it used to be everybody knew. Like, here's the exact number. Nobody knows, and she's supposedly trying to figure it out. But every time you turn around, there's a comic shop going out of business. Some of them have been in business for decades, and they're going out of business. And they're like, oh, yeah, but two more popped up. And it turned out it was like a flea market stall or something like that.
Really?
Yes.
A lot of them just pop up and they have comics in the shop, but their main focus isn't comics.
That's another thing too. Like it's hard to qualify what a comic shop is anymore because there are a lot of stores out there that sell geek stuff. They sell manga, they sell anime, they sell video game merch, they sell action figures. but they don't sell like new release comics, or if they do, they sell very few of them. A lot of them are game shops that might have carried comics. I know in one case, there's a game store that we go to, they used to carry comics and they just stopped because they're like, nobody's buying them. Mm-hmm. Nobody's buying comics, so we don't sell them anymore. We just sell tabletop games because that's what they're buying. So here's the proof is in the pudding, guys. So here it is. And this, again, was a couple weeks ago. We didn't talk about it because nobody cares about comics. After 2 years of land office business, it was inevitable that the sales would crash, basically. ICV2 got the hard sales data from a number of retailers comparing September through December 22 to the same period in 2021 when people were locked in their houses. This is Coliseum of Comics with 12 stores in Florida. New Comics down 3.2%. DC Comics down 10%. Marvel Comics down 3%.
I thought Marvel would be a lot more than that, honestly.
I thought it would be too. Image down 27%. Boom down 28%. Dark Horse down 25%. Indie Comics down 36%. Manga up 28%. Mm-hmm. Other categories, back issues up 7%. Funko sales up.
Yeah, that surprises me because meanwhile, Funko's like shredding and, burying all kinds of toys.
Yeah, so let's kind of segue into that. So the backup for these comic shops, this is what's really interesting. The backup is, everybody jokes about, you go to comic conventions, you see it too, the wall of Funko Pops. Like that's, well, Funko's not doing so hot now. And they got an issue with Mondo too. Mondo's... they basically are getting disemboweled by Funko. Funko's in
they put a statement out that it wasn't as bad as people thought or something like that.
Yeah, and it didn't go very well. But here's a whole bunch of Funko Pops found in a landfill. They overproduced. They were saying, we've done this before, they were saying that they had shipping containers full of these things.
What's weird was they're supposed to shred them before they dumped them off. That's what's weird. And those boxes are just sitting there.
So where's that landfill at? Because nerds are going to be.
I mean, if they're full boxes. I mean, I'm like, they're supposed to shred them first. So I'm kind of a little bit like, maybe they just tried to cut corners and not pay to shred them. But I don't know. Something's weird there.
Maybe we'll dump them off. We'll take the write down, and then we'll send somebody in the middle of the night to go back and get them.
I don't know.
Sell them. But they said they took a write down, $30 to $36 million in Funko Pops.
But they're saying that their Funkos are up 29%.
Well, at that shop, their sales are, but apparently Walmart and Target aren't selling them like they used to. They don't have the big sections of them anymore. I know a lot of them were getting cleared out. I remember at Walmart, you could find like the giant ones for like $10.
People are like, well, that's what they are. They're destroyed shipments from Walmart and stuff. The thing is, I don't think they are because what Walmart does is, and I know Amazon does the same thing. They take truckloads of stuff, and if it's not selling or if they're damaged in shipment or whatever, they just sell it by the truckload, the pallets, to other people. So I don't think they would be dropping them off. But we're talking like, I've seen stuff that was completely like smashed to pieces, and they still put it in those pallets.
Yeah. I think a lot of this is smoke and mirrors. I think a lot of these, like Funko's been... People don't realize, like, Funko for all, it's like, oh yeah, Funko sales are up. Funko sales are doing really well. Funko's actually been in the news for having financial problems for the last, like, 3 or 4 years now. Yeah, it's starting to really catch up with them. Then they bought Mondo, and Mondo was, high-end collectibles, posters, vinyls, the big He-Man figures. And they basically gutted Mondo, and now they're trying to do damage control because people are pissed, and they like their limited edition posters, and they're like, oh yeah, we're basically just gonna make a shit ton of them. Yeah. Like all the other Funko stuff. And there's been a lot of backlash because people are like, well, the whole point of Mondo was the stuff was like super
You pay
limited.
more, but it was very limited. Yeah.
And it was high quality stuff. And now, like even you bought the She-Ra figure, and that came out after Funko bought Mondo, and they had to replace all the heads because
the nose got smashed. Mine's one of the ones that got smashed, actually.
Yeah. So you got a replacement head. And so people are already like, you're turning Mondo into just another Funko thing, and it's going to be a bunch of crap, and the posters are probably going to wind up in the
Funko manufactured fun.
Manufactured fun. Funko's like hot topic embodied.
You said hot topic was mass produced individuality.
It is.
That's what you say. It's funny.
So this is not good though. That this is the backup for a lot of these shops, Funko Pops and stuff, and Magic the Gathering cards. Same thing. They overproduced. Hasbro got called out. We're finding them in landfills. Now we can argue where they're coming from exactly, but I've heard that the secondary market on those are collapsing because there's too much. There's too much. This is Graham Crackers. I've heard of that store. 13 stores in Chicago. Chain-wide sales down 4%. Backlist graphic novels down 10%. New indie comics, everything except Marvel and DC down 5%. Back issues down 1%. Jen King, Space Cadet Collectibles in Texas. And gotta give a hat tip there. She bought Shadowbinders. I remember they carried Shadow. They did. I do remember.
Go shop there, guys.
Yeah, I do remember them buying some. Overall store sales down 3.5%. Graphic novels down 8%. All comics, new and back issues combined down. Holy shit.
Yeah, that's not good.
All comics, new and back issues combined down 48%.
All items not comics or graphic novels up 6%.
Are you seeing a trend here? Basically, the comic shops are doing well in everything but comics. So basically, I think what's going on here is a lot of comic shops aren't coming out and saying what's actually going on, but we're seeing shops that have been in business for decades. Like I know there's one in Philadelphia that opened in like 76 or something. They just went out of business. And they were ones that were predominantly Western floppy comics.
Yeah.
And, you know, it really is a pretty dire situation. There was a temporary reprieve, I think, during the pandemic, because again, people were locked in their houses. But a lot of it, the publishers, from what I've heard, they were taking PPP loans to get by through the pandemic. And now that, you know, the bills are coming due, we're hearing stories. And we haven't heard these stories in a while. And I want to talk about it because the comic book industry, and we've known this for years, you're expected to be part of like the family. And if there's bad news, you're not allowed to say anything about it. Or you get excommunicated from the group.
Yeah, which we know.
I mean, hell, Geeky, you did an interview and
a long time ago.
Yeah, it was on some website and it was talking about female comic book creators.
Right.
And you didn't toe the line with the narrative and they literally cut your entire interview out of the article.
But I was the only one that had professional credit.
Yes.
Yeah, they interviewed a bunch of indie creators that worked in comics and they were all women. And the narrative they wanted was women are being kept down. Well, I pointed out that wasn't necessarily the case, especially in graphic novels, like Scholastic type books and things like that. I'm like, yeah, Marvel and DC at the time, yeah, there wasn't a lot of women there. But they still had editors and people in charge that were women. And I mentioned that, and since it didn't toe the line, they did not put my comments in the interview, but I was literally the only one who had professional credit.
Yeah, and this was before everything went as crazy as it did on Twitter. It was basically like, hey, you know, women aren't being kept down in comics. You cited multiple examples. I did cite multiple examples. Powerful female creators, powerful editors, the fact that DC Comics had a woman in charge for years, and they're just like, yeah, that doesn't support our narrative, victimhood narrative. And this was way before all this started. This is like early 2000, like 2012 or something. It wasn't even earlier than that. Maybe like 2011, something like that. It was like a long time ago, like 12 years ago. And before all this, I want to say, was it Comics Alliance or one of these sites that aren't? I don't remember, but it was the article. They got a bunch of women. Most of them were like web comic creators who wished they had an audience but didn't have one. Yeah. No offense, web comic creators. These women in particular were like very, you know, pay attention to me. You know, I wish maybe if I kissed enough ass, I'm gonna read my book, kind of stuff. And I was one who actually had an audience and who had pro credit. Yeah. That sounds arrogant. I'm not meaning to be arrogant. I'm just telling you the situation. Yeah. So, I mean, we know how the comic book industry is. If you're not getting paid, you're not allowed to say anything about it. And that's where I wanted to go with this because we heard a lot back in, like October, November of comic book freelancers not getting paid, and it hit the media and then it disappeared. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think, given these sales numbers, that things have actually improved. I think that these people were told to shut up if they want to keep working in comics. And the industry tends to protect itself. So what they've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years now is spinning this narrative that everything was fantastic, taking the manga sales and rolling them into the comic book sales. And it's like, I want to see a breakdown. Like, what percentage of the comic book industry sales are manga? What are graphic novels? What are back issues? And then look at new comic sales. And the reason they don't do that, in my opinion, is because of this. They know if they put headlines out there that, you know, new comic sales, that Marvel comic sales are bad, Disney will just snap the division. Probably. You know, Warner will just snap it. Yeah. Or they won't put as much into it, you know what I'm saying? So it's, you know, I just think it's really funny that here we are. It took 5 years for the comic book media to catch up to where everybody else has been, you know, where the readers have been, where the YouTubers have been, and all the attacks on people, all the cancel culture bullshit that was going on, all the Twitter drama, the blacklisting, all of that, and we're arriving at the exact same conclusion, but now it's too fucking late to do anything about it.
Well, they waited until people made it safe for them to say the same thing.
Yeah, and what'll happen is they'll just pretend like, oh yeah, people got blacklisted. No, nobody actually got blacklisted. It was consequence culture. It wasn't cancel culture. What are you talking about? I just forgot to put your name on the list. Whoops, I must have accidentally unfollowed you on Twitter. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, to all those people, middle finger.
All right, we're gonna wrap this up.
Yep.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.
Bye.
Help support the channel. Go to thereef.support and get early access to podcasts, videos, and other content. That's thereef.support.